Have you ever found yourself dreading an empty evening, scrolling through your phone just to fill the silence? Or maybe you've caught yourself worrying that if you aren't surrounded by people, you're somehow missing out, that being alone means being left behind. It's a fear so many of us carry, especially in a world that equates busyness with worth and constant connection with happiness. But what if I told you that solitude isn't something to fear, but something to master, that the very thing we run from, being alone, could become our greatest source of strength? This is where Stoicism, a philosophy forged in the fires of adversity over 2,000 years ago, offers us a lifeline. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." Think about that for a moment. In a world that never stops moving, he's pointing us inward to a refuge that's always available, no matter how isolated we might feel. Stoicism doesn't just teach us to endure solitude, it teaches us to reclaim it. Imagine transforming those quiet moments from something you tolerate into something you cherish, a space where you're not lonely but free. Free to think, to grow, to become the kind of person who doesn't need external validation to feel whole. This isn't about shutting people out. It's about building an unshakable foundation within yourself so that whether you're surrounded by a crowd or sitting alone in stillness, you're never truly lacking. And that's where these 26 Stoic life lessons come in. They're not quick fixes or empty affirmations. They're time-tested principles that reframe solitude as an opportunity, not a punishment. So if you've ever felt the sting of loneliness or the weight of wondering whether you'll always be on your own, this is for you. Because Stoicism doesn't just dispel the fear of being alone forever. It replaces that fear with something far more powerful, the unshakable confidence that you are enough. Over the course of this video, we'll explore how to turn solitude into your ally, how to find richness in quiet moments, and how to build a life where being alone doesn't mean being lonely. This isn't about escaping the modern world. It's about returning to it with a newfound resilience, one that no amount of isolation can shake, ready to begin. Let's dive in. There's a profound difference between loneliness and solitude. One drains you, while the other fills you up. The Stoics didn't just tolerate being alone. They saw it as a rare gift, a chance to reconnect with yourself without the noise of the world. Seneca, one of Stoicism's greatest teachers, wrote letters to his friend Lucilius about this very idea. He said, "Be wary of the crowd. It's in solitude that you'll find yourself." Think about that. 2,000 years ago, in a world without social media or constant distractions, Seneca was already warning us about the trap of needing others to define our worth. He wasn't against connection, he was for clarity. Solitude to him was like a mirror, a space where you could see yourself honestly without the masks we wear in public. Now contrast that with how we often experience alone time today. How many of us panic when we're left with just our thoughts? We reach for our phones, turn on the TV, or fill the silence with anything but stillness. But what if, instead of running from those quiet moments, we treated them like Seneca did, as an invitation? Imagine sitting with a journal at the end of the day, not to vent or complain, but to reflect. To ask yourself, what did I learn today? Where did I act with courage? Where did I let fear take over? That's the Stoic approach. It's not about isolation. It's about using solitude to become more grounded, more aware. Here's a modern example: meditation. It's not about emptying your mind, it's about observing it. The same goes for Stoic solitude. When you're alone, you're not avoiding life, you're preparing to live it more fully. You're building the kind of inner strength that doesn't crumble when external validation fades. So here's a question to sit with. When was the last time you truly enjoyed being alone? Not just killing time, but savoring it. If the answer doesn't come easily, that's okay. This is where the practice begins, because solitude isn't a punishment, it's the workshop where you craft the best version of yourself. What if your happiness didn't depend on whether someone texted you back, or whether you were invited to that event, or even whether you spent the evening alone? That's the radical question at the heart of Epictetus' teachings. As a former slave turned Stoic philosopher, he knew better than anyone how little control we truly have over external circumstances, but he also knew the immense power we hold over our own minds. His famous dichotomy of control is like a flashlight in the dark, helping us see clearly what's worth our energy and what isn't. Think of it this way: you can't control the weather, but you can control whether you carry an umbrella. You can't force someone to love you, but you can choose how you respond to rejection. The moment we stop tying our peace to things outside our grasp is the moment we reclaim our freedom. Here's where most of us get stuck, though. We confuse influence with control. You might influence how others perceive you by being kind or talented, but you can't control their reactions. You might influence your career by working hard, but you can't control market shifts or a boss's mood. Epictetus would say that's okay, more than okay, actually. Because when you pour your energy into what you can control, your effort, your perspective, your values, you stop feeling like life is happening to you and start feeling like an active participant. Imagine waking up each morning and asking yourself, what's mine to handle today? Not in a resigned way, but with focus. Your thoughts, yours, your actions. Yours, your attitude when plans fall apart, absolutely yours. Let's make this practical. Grab a sheet of paper and draw a line down the middle. On one side, list things you can't control, other people's opinions, traffic delays, the past. On the other, list what you can, how you prepare for a meeting, whether you judge someone, how deeply you breathe when stress hits. Do this for 5 minutes every morning and something shifts. You start catching yourself before you spiral over a rude comment or a cancelled plan. You begin to see solitude not as a void to fill, but as space to exercise your agency. That's the Stoic secret. Solitude becomes powerful when you use it to practice what's yours to shape. So tonight, when you're alone, try this instead of scrolling. Ask yourself, what did I control well today? Where did I hand my peace away? No guilt, just observation. Because the more you practice this distinction, the less alone feels like lack, and the more it feels like liberation. Marcus Aurelius didn't rule Rome with a team of therapists or a support group. He ruled with the unshakable understanding that his peace was his own responsibility. In his private writings, later published as Meditations, he scribbled this reminder to himself: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's the essence of self-sufficiency in Stoicism. It's not about rejecting help or living like a hermit. It's about recognizing that your worth, your joy, and your resilience don't come from others. They come from how you choose to meet the world. Think about how often we outsource our happiness. We wait for a partner to make us feel loved, for friends to make us feel valued, for achievements to make us feel enough. But the Stoics would call that a fragile way to live. Imagine building a house on someone else's foundation. The moment they shift, your whole structure cracks. Now picture building on your own bedrock. That's what self-sufficiency looks like. It's not arrogance, it's stability. The ancient Stoics practiced this through deliberate hardship, sleeping on the floor, eating plain meals, voluntarily facing discomfort, not to punish themselves, but to prove they could thrive without luxury or applause. Fast forward to today. We've swapped those exercises for endless scrolling, binge watching, and the dopamine hits of likes and notifications. The modern version of Stoic self-sufficiency might look like this: spending a Saturday without your phone, cooking a meal just for yourself and savoring it, or sitting through boredom without reaching for distraction. It's in these small acts that you rediscover an ancient truth: you are the source. Not your job title, not your relationship status, not your social calendar. So here's a challenge. What if for 1 week you acted as if your contentment depended entirely on you, not in a selfish way, but in a grounded way? How would you spend your evenings? What would you stop chasing? What would you start appreciating? The Stoics weren't against connection, they were against dependency. There's a quiet confidence that grows when you realize no one can give you or take away what matters most: your character, your perspective, your ability to adapt. That's the gift of self-sufficiency. It turns solitude from a void into fertile ground where you stop waiting for life to happen and start building it. Seneca had a counterintuitive practice that might sound unsettling at first, but stick with me, because it's one of the most liberating tools Stoicism offers. He called it Premeditatio Malorum, or the premeditation of evils. At its core, it's not about pessimism, it's about clarity. Here's how it works. Instead of waiting for life to remind you how fragile things are, you voluntarily and briefly imagine losing what you cherish: your health, your home, even the people you love. Before you dismiss this as morbid, consider why Seneca insisted on this exercise. He wasn't trying to scare you, he was teaching you to see. When you consciously confront the temporary nature of everything, 2 things happen. First, the grip of fear loosens because you've already faced the possibility in your mind. Second, and more importantly, you start appreciating what you have right now, today, as if you'd just gotten it back. Let's make this real. Picture a quiet evening at home, no plans, no distractions. For many, that's the exact scenario that triggers loneliness. But what if you flipped the script, close your eyes and imagine, just for a moment, that this quiet didn't come by choice? That you'd give anything to be back in this ordinary moment after a crisis, a hospital stay, a natural disaster, a loss that reshaped your world. Suddenly, that silent room isn't empty, it's sacred. The chair you're sitting in isn't just furniture, it's a gift. That's the power of negative visualization. It's not about dwelling on loss, it's about waking up to the richness of what's already here. Now apply this to solitude itself. What if, instead of fearing being alone, you treated it like a rare artifact you might lose? The freedom to think without interruption, the space to hear your own voice. These aren't guarantees. People in overcrowded cities or those trapped in toxic relationships often crave the very solitude we resent. Seneca would say, "Don't wait to miss it before you value it." So tonight, try this. Before you reach for your phone or turn on the TV, pause. Ask yourself, what would I miss about this moment if it were gone tomorrow? The stillness, the lack of demands, the chance to just be. That's how you rewrite the story of being alone, from lack to abundance. Because when you stop seeing solitude as a placeholder for something better, you start seeing it as the gift it always was. Rejection is protection, a phrase that sounds like empty comfort until you unpack the profound Stoic wisdom behind it. Consider Epictetus, born into slavery, his body broken by a cruel master, yet his mind unshakable. When he gained his freedom and began teaching philosophy, he faced exile when Emperor Domitian banished all philosophers from Rome. Did Epictetus crumble? No, he saw it as redirection, setting up his school in Nicopolis where his teachings would reach generations far beyond Domitian's reach. That's the Stoic lens. Rejection isn't a verdict on your worth, it's an invitation to pivot. Here's why this matters when facing solitude. Every no from others, whether it's a missed connection, a lost opportunity, or a silent evening when plans fall through, carries the same hidden potential. The job that rejected you, it might have trapped you in a role that dulled your spark. The relationship that ended, It could have kept you from the self-discovery that only comes in solitude. The Stoics didn't just tolerate rejection, they interrogated it. They asked, what if this isn't blocking my path but clearing it? Let's bring this into your life. That friend who always cancels, instead of resenting the empty evening, use it to read the book that's been gathering dust or to practice the skill you've been postponing. The date that ghosted you, treat it as proof you're not wasting time on the wrong person. Even the Romans knew this. Seneca wrote that storms blow ships to new harbors. Solitude, then, isn't just empty space, it's the blank page where you draft your next chapter. Try this exercise tonight. List 3 rejections, big or small, that stung. Next to each, write one way they redirected you. Maybe a failed project led you to a better mentor. Maybe a lonely weekend pushed you to finally start that podcast. The goal isn't to pretend it didn't hurt, but to see the pivot hidden in the pain. Because when you stop fearing rejection, you stop fearing solitude. You start seeing both as the universe whispering, try this instead. And that's when the real journey begins. Picture a lone oak tree standing in an open field, no other trees nearby, just the sky above and earth below. It doesn't strain to grow faster or resent its solitude. It simply reaches for the sun, roots deepening with each season. That's Zeno's vision of living in accordance with nature. The founder of Stoicism watched a solitary vine thrive against the odds and realized, we flourish not by fighting life's rhythms, but by embracing them. Your life, like that tree, has seasons, periods of connection and solitude, activity and rest. The question isn't whether you'll face lonely phases, it's whether you'll resist them or let them shape you. Nature doesn't hurry, yet everything gets done. Rivers don't force their way downstream, they flow. Winter doesn't apologize for its silence, it prepares the ground for spring. So why do we treat our own quiet seasons like failures? The Stoics saw solitude as natural as breathing, not a disruption to fix, but a rhythm to honor. Marcus Aurelius wrote of this as amor fati, the love of fate, not just accepting what happens, but embracing it as if you'd chosen it yourself. When you stop wrestling against loneliness and start asking, what does this season want to teach me? Something shifts. That empty weekend becomes space to reflect. The unplanned evening turns into a chance to listen not to podcasts or playlists, but to your own thoughts. Here's where modern life gets tangled. We've been taught that busy equals important, that solitude equals stagnation, but nature's wisdom says otherwise. Consider hibernation. Bears don't fret over lost time, they trust the quiet as part of their survival. Or think of fallow fields left unplanted to restore their fertility. Your alone time isn't wasted, it's restorative. The Stoics would urge you to ask, are you judging your solitude by society's clock instead of your own inner compass? That friend who seems constantly surrounded by people might envy your capacity to be content alone. That coworker who fills every silence with chatter might secretly dread the stillness you've learned to navigate. Practical tip: next time solitude feels heavy, step outside. Literally, watch how clouds drift without urgency, how ants build without complaint, how night follows day without debate. Then ask yourself, what if my lonely phases aren't obstacles but part of the terrain? What if, like that oak tree, I'm meant to grow here, not in spite of being alone, but because of it? Nature's blueprint for thriving isn't found in resistance, but in rootedness. And that's the secret Zeno handed down. Your solitude isn't against nature. It is nature, and that makes it holy ground. Epictetus, the Stoic teacher who turned hardship into wisdom, posed a question that cuts through 2,000 years of noise. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Imagine saying that today when every like, swipe, and follow seems to whisper whether we matter. His warning wasn't against connection, but against craving it like oxygen. Because here's the paradox: the more you need others to validate you, the less power you have to truly connect. The Stoics called this the slavery of desire, when your peace depends on something outside your control. Now picture modern loneliness, that pang when you see couples holding hands, the itch to check how many likes your post got, the way your stomach drops when plans get cancelled. What if those aren't just passing emotions but signals? Signals that you've handed the keys to your contentment to people, algorithms, and circumstances that will never prioritize your peace. Social media didn't invent this craving, it just amplified it. Scrolling through curated highlight reels trains us to compare our behind the scenes with everyone else's premiere. But here's what Epictetus knew: no amount of external approval will fill the space meant for self-approval. The Stoic alternative isn't isolation, it's sovereignty. It's the difference between thinking, "I'll be happy when someone chooses me," and declaring, "I choose myself now." Ancient Rome had its own version of influencers, politicians clamoring for applause, philosophers chasing fame. Epictetus watched them and noted, it's impossible to be both enslaved to opinion and free at the same time. Fast forward to today, that anxiety you feel when you're not included. It's not proof you're unlovable, it's proof you've been conditioned to measure your worth by visibility. So let's get practical. Tonight, try this. For every minute you spend scrolling, spend 30 seconds journaling one sentence about what you genuinely value, not what you think you should want. Not, "I wish I had their relationship," but "I value deep conversations." Not, "I need more followers," but "I enjoy creating." Over time, you'll spot the gap between your true desires and the ones society implanted. Because mastering desire isn't about crushing wants, it's about discerning which are yours and which you inherited. When solitude feels heavy, ask Epictetus' question: who owns this feeling, me or the world's expectations? The answer might surprise you. Marcus Aurelius faced more in a single day than most of us do in a lifetime: rebellions, plagues, betrayals, yet his private journals reveal a startling truth. He didn't beg for easier circumstances, he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's the Stoic secret to resilience. Loneliness, when reframed, isn't a void to fear. It's the gym where your emotional muscles grow strongest. Think about physical training for a moment. You don't build strength by lifting feathers, you need resistance. The same applies to your inner world. Those quiet nights, the unreturned messages, the events you weren't invited to, they're not proof of inadequacy. They're barbells for your soul. The ancient Stoics didn't just philosophize about resilience, they engineered it through deliberate practice. Seneca voluntarily wore rough clothing and slept on hard floors. Musonius Rufus ate simple meals of bread and water. These weren't acts of punishment, they were rehearsals for life's inevitable hardships. Modern equivalents might look like taking cold showers, fasting from social media, or spending a day without complaining. These practices share one purpose: to teach you that discomfort won't break you. That's the alchemy of resilience, transforming what feels like abandonment into autonomy. Consider this experiment. Next time loneliness lingers, don't numb it with distractions. Sit with it for just 10 minutes. Notice where it lives in your body: tightness in your chest, restlessness in your hands. Then ask, what if this feeling isn't weakness leaving, but strength arriving? History's most resilient figures, from Nelson Mandela to Maya Angelou, didn't avoid solitude. They used it to forge unshakable cores. Mandela's prison cell became his meditation chamber. Angelou's years of silence birthed her thunderous voice. So here's a challenge: trace your own scars of resilience. Maybe it was the year you moved cities knowing no one, or the project that failed spectacularly but taught you how to pivot. Even small victories count. The morning you worked out despite exhaustion, the difficult conversation you didn't avoid. Resilience isn't about grand gestures. It's the accumulation of moments when you chose to meet discomfort rather than flee it. The Stoics would remind you, you've already survived 100% of your worst days. What makes you think the next one will be any different? Tonight, try this. Before bed, write down one hardship from your past that, though painful, equipped you with a skill, insight, or layer of grit you still rely on today. Then imagine your future self, years from now, thanking your present self for enduring this current season of solitude. Because resilience isn't just about bouncing back, it's about growing roots so deep that no storm, not even the storm of loneliness, can topple you. And those roots, they grow best in quiet soil. Imagine a ship tethered to the dock, ropes straining as the tide pulls it seaward. The crew could cut the lines and set sail, but instead they clutch the frayed ropes until their hands bleed, terrified of what lies beyond the harbor they know. That's how Seneca saw our relationship with the past. In his letters to Lucilius, he wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality," pointing to the absurdity of letting yesterday's anchors sink today's voyage. The Stoics weren't dismissive of pain, they were ruthlessly practical about it. Grief has its season, regret its purpose, but when they overstay their welcome, they become shackles. Consider the story of Cato the Younger, Seneca's Stoic hero. After losing his political career and facing exile, he didn't spend his days lamenting what was. He rebuilt his library, mentored young thinkers, and refined his philosophy in the very place meant to punish him. His past wasn't erased, it was composted, transformed into fuel for growth. That's the alchemy Stoicism teaches, not to forget but to repurpose. Your failed relationship, it taught you boundaries. The job you lost, it redirected you to work that matters. Even the childhood wounds you carry, they're not just scars, they're maps showing where healing needs to happen. Here's the trap we fall into, though. We confuse honoring the past with being hostage to it. You might replay that breakup conversation 100 times, or agonize over the promotion you didn't get, as if mental replay could rewrite history. Seneca would call this borrowing sorrow from the future. The energy you spend resurrecting dead moments is stolen from the living one in front of you. Picture someone holding a burning coal in their fist, swearing the fire happened years ago. That's what clinging to pain looks like. So let's get practical. Grab a sheet of paper and draw 2 columns. In the first, list past events that still haunt you. In the second, write 1 sentence about how each shaped a strength you now possess. The betrayal that sharpened your discernment, the failure that taught you resilience. This isn't about toxic positivity, it's about reclaiming agency. Because the past only has the power you lend it. Tonight, try Seneca's ship exercise. Visualize cutting 1 rope, just one. What regret are you ready to release from its dock? The moment you do, you'll feel the tide carrying you toward waters you were meant to sail all along. Picture holding a handful of sand at the beach. Tighten your grip, and it slips through your fingers faster. Loosen your grasp, and you can watch each grain catch the light before it falls. That's how Marcus Aurelius saw life itself. In his private writings, he returns again and again to this truth. All things fade into the storied past, and in a little while are shrouded in oblivion. Not to depress us, but to free us, because when you truly absorb that nothing lasts, not the bad, not the good, not even you, it changes how you hold everything. Especially loneliness. Think about the last time solitude felt heavy. Maybe it was a Sunday evening stretching empty in front of you, or a phone that stayed silent for days. In that moment, it's easy to believe this is how it will always be. but the Stoics would ask, has anything in your life ever stayed the same? Childhood friendships that felt eternal now live only in yearbook signatures. Jobs you thought defined you became footnotes. Even pain you were certain would never fade. Heartbreak, grief, softened with time. Impermanence isn't just about loss, it's the reason hope exists. The loneliness you feel today isn't a life sentence, it's a season, and seasons change. Marcus Aurelius had a practice for this. Each morning he'd remind himself, today I shall meet interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness. Not because he expected the worst, but because he knew nothing, no hardship, no joy would last. That's the unexpected gift of impermanence, the party you weren't invited to. It's already fading, the relationship that ended, its weight lightens with each sunrise. Even your own identity, the lonely one, the left behind, is just a story you can rewrite. Here's where this gets practical. Next time solitude feels suffocating, try this Stoic exercise. Write down 3 things from your past that once felt permanent but aren't anymore. The school you couldn't imagine leaving, the person you thought you'd never get over, the fear that once kept you awake now barely remembered. Then ask, what if this current loneliness is just another item on that list? Not to dismiss your feelings, but to put them in perspective. Now flip it. Think of 3 moments of connection you cherish: a laugh with a stranger on a train, a deep talk under stars, an unexpected kindness. They ended too, didn't they? Yet their brevity didn't make them less precious, it made them more so. That's the paradox the Stoics want you to embrace. Accepting impermanence doesn't rob life of meaning, it distills it. When nothing lasts, everything becomes sacred. The quiet evening alone isn't empty, it's rare. The phone call from a friend isn't routine, it's fleeting magic. So here's the question to carry with you. How would you live today if you knew nothing would stay? Not in frantic grasping, but in attentive gratitude. Would you waste the afternoon scrolling, or would you sit quietly and feel the sun on your skin? Would you obsess over who hasn't texted you, or would you reach out to someone else who might be feeling just as alone? The sand is falling, grain by grain. The Stoics wouldn't tell you to mourn it. They'd tell you to let it run through your fingers and marvel at how it sparkles on the way down. Epictetus, the Stoic teacher who turned a life of slavery into a masterclass on inner freedom, posed a question that still cuts to the bone today. If someone handed your body to a passerby, you'd be outraged. So why hand your mind over to anyone who happens to criticize you? Think about that for a second. We wouldn't let a stranger dictate what we eat for breakfast, yet we routinely let them decide whether we're worthy through likes, comparisons, or the silent judgment of who's invited where. The Stoics didn't just reject this outsourcing of self-worth. They built an entire philosophy around reclaiming it. Take marriage as an example. Society often treats it like a finish line, as if staying single means you're lagging behind in some cosmic race. But here's what Epictetus would say. Does a tree need applause to grow? Does the ocean require witnesses to be vast? Your value isn't measured by relationship status any more than a painting's beauty is determined by its frame. Consider Oprah Winfrey, who transformed years of professional rejection and personal solitude into a legacy of influence, or Keanu Reeves, who turned grief and isolation into a quiet generosity that never seeks headlines. Their lives whisper a truth the Stoics shouted. Fulfillment isn't found in the roles society assigns you, but in the integrity you bring to every moment, whether anyone's watching or not. This isn't about dismissing connection. It's about dismantling the lie that being chosen by others is the same as being enough. The ancient Stoics practiced something radical for their time and ours. They wrote their own report cards. Marcus Aurelius graded himself not by conquests but by character. Musonius Rufus measured success in virtues mastered, not villas owned. You might not keep a leather-bound journal like they did, but you can start asking better questions. Next time you feel the sting of not measuring up, whether it's a friend's engagement announcement or yet another family-only holiday invite, pause. Ask yourself, who's holding the scoreboard here, and when did I agree to their rules? Here's the exercise Epictetus would assign you tonight. Grab a notebook and draw 3 columns. In the first, list societal metrics you've unconsciously accepted: marital status, job title, social media followers. In the second, write what each one promises, e.g., marriage equals happiness. Now, in the third, challenge it with Stoic logic. If this were true, why do so many married people feel lonely? Why do CEOs still stress over bigger titles? The goal isn't cynicism, it's clarity. Because when you define your worth by external markers, you're always one change away from crisis. But when you anchor it in your choices, how kind you were today, what you learned, how you grew, you carry an unshakable compass. So the next time solitude feels like a verdict, remember, you're not being left out of someone else's story. You're the author of your own, and that's a power no amount of loneliness can take from you. Marcus Aurelius began each day not with a to-do list but with a simple ritual. He'd whisper names: the teacher who disciplined him with patience, the friend who loaned him books, even the nurse who once bandaged his knee. This wasn't just nostalgia, it was Stoic armor. By anchoring his mornings in gratitude, he fortified himself against the day's inevitable friction. Think about that contrast for a moment. Most of us wake up scanning for what's missing: the unanswered emails, the dwindling bank balance, the empty side of the bed. But Marcus trained his mind like a spotlight, deliberately illuminating what was already there. That's the alchemy of gratitude. It doesn't deny life's gaps, it refuses to let them eclipse the whole picture. Now consider how this applies to solitude. When you're alone, it's easy to fixate on what you lack: the laughter of a partner, the buzz of a crowded room. But the Stoics would call this a trick of perception. Scarcity and abundance aren't just circumstances, they're lenses. Seneca wrote letters from exile describing the vivid colors of sunsets over Corsica, the clarity of thought that isolation brought. He wasn't pretending his banishment didn't sting. He was choosing daily to also see its gifts. That's the power of a gratitude practice. It doesn't erase loneliness. It balances the scales so you notice the warmth of sunlight through your window, the freedom to eat what you crave without compromise, the silent thrill of finishing a book in one sitting. Let's make this tangible. Grab any notebook, the back of a receipt works, and try this tonight. Write down 3 things you'd miss if they vanished tomorrow. Not the grand, obvious ones like family or health, though those count, but the tiny textures of your solo life, the way your coffee tastes when you sip it slowly, the playlist you've curated over years, the pillow that fits just right under your neck. This exercise isn't about slapping a smile on solitude. It's about excavating its hidden layers. Psychologists call this the focusing illusion. We overestimate how much external changes a relationship, a promotion will affect our happiness because we overlook the mundane joys already present. Gratitude corrects that blindness. Here's where it gets transformative. That thing you're taking for granted right now, the ability to walk, to see, to step outside without fear. Someone today is praying for it. The Stoics knew this intimately. Epictetus, who limped from a leg broken in slavery, would remind his students, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." Your solitude, framed differently, might be someone else's dream: the busy parent craving quiet, the overstimulated artist needing space to create. Doesn't mean your loneliness isn't valid. It means you hold both truths. This hurts, and this is also fertile ground. So tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, borrow Marcus' ritual. Name one person who shaped you, one comfort you didn't earn, one tiny pleasure solitude affords. Then ask yourself, what if gratitude isn't just a feeling but a skill, one that, like a muscle, grows stronger with each rep? The more you practice, the more you'll catch yourself mid-complaint, startled by the realization you were standing in a field of gifts, staring at the one patch of bare earth. Imagine a basketball player sinking shot after shot in an empty gym. No crowd cheering, no scoreboard ticking, just the pure rhythm of the game. Now picture that same player in a packed arena, suddenly missing every attempt because they're fixated on the points, the clock, the roar of the crowd. That's the difference between playing for love of the game and playing for an outcome. Seneca's concept of amor fati, loving one's fate, works the same way. It's not about ignoring results, it's about not letting them hijack your presence in the process. Apply this to dating. How many first dates have been ruined by the weight of expectation? You're not really listening to the person across the table because you're already scripting your future together, or dismissing them because they don't fit a predetermined mold. The Stoic approach: show up as the player in the empty gym. Be curious, engaged fully in the moment, not because this interaction guarantees a relationship, but because the act of connecting is valuable in itself. The same goes for friendships. That text you sent to an old friend, if you're only happy when they reply quickly, you've handed your piece over to their inbox. But if you genuinely enjoyed writing it, recalling inside jokes or sharing news, then their response becomes a bonus, not a verdict on your worth. Here's the radical question Seneca would ask: can you enjoy the conversation without needing it to lead somewhere? Can you savor the quiet companionship of a walk with a friend without needing it to fix your loneliness? Modern life bombards us with metrics, matches, likes, RSVP, as if they're proof we're doing life right. But the Stoics measured differently. A good day wasn't one where everything went as planned. It was one where you stayed aligned with your values regardless of outcomes. Try this reframe next time you're waiting for a callback or an invitation. Ask yourself, what part of this process did I genuinely enjoy? Maybe it was the nervous excitement of trying a new coffee shop for the date, or the vulnerability of reaching out to someone first. Those moments aren't erased just because things didn't unfold as you hoped. In fact, they might be the very experiences that prepare you for what's next, not by guaranteeing a specific result, but by teaching you how to show up fully, no matter what the scoreboard says. Because here's the secret amor fati reveals: when you stop needing life to go a certain way to be happy, you start seeing the gifts hidden in every outcome, even the ones that initially feel like losses. The job rejection that pushed you toward a better fit, the friendship that faded, making space for deeper connections, the quiet evenings that taught you how to enjoy your own company. Loving your fate isn't passive acceptance. It's active trust that the universe isn't punishing you with solitude, but preparing you for something you can't yet see. And that changes everything. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of Stoicism's most revered teachers, cut through life's noise with a single razor-sharp truth: there is only one good virtue and only one evil vice. At first glance, that might sound rigid or outdated in our complex world, but unpack it, and you'll find a radical blueprint for inner freedom. Imagine virtue not as a checklist of rules, but as the chisel you use to sculpt your character day by day. Think of Michelangelo standing before a block of marble, seeing not just rock, but the potential for David hidden within. Your character is that marble, your choices the chisel. Every time you choose patience over irritation, integrity over convenience, courage over comfort, you're not just being good. You're carving out a version of yourself that no circumstance can erode. Now here's where modern life distracts us. We're taught to focus on external markers, job titles, relationship status, social media metrics, as if they're the finish line. But the Stoics would ask, what good is a promotion if you compromised your honesty to get it? How fulfilling is a relationship if you've neglected to cultivate kindness within yourself first? Virtue isn't a means to an end, it's the end itself. Consider the quiet heroism of a volunteer who serves meals at a soup kitchen week after week. No cameras rolling, no applause. They're not just feeding the hungry, they're refining their own capacity for compassion. That's the Stoic secret. Character isn't built in grand declarations, but in the small, often unseen moments when you align your actions with your principles. Let's make this personal. Close your eyes and ask, what kind of person do you want to become? Not what kind of life you want to have, the person. When you're 80 and looking back, what qualities do you hope to find you? Maybe it's resilience, the ability to weather storms without bitterness, or generosity, a habit of giving without keeping score. Epictetus would say those traits aren't born, they're forged. Every time you choose to listen instead of interrupt, to persist when you want to quit, to forgive when you're justified in holding a grudge, you're not just navigating a situation. You're answering that question with your hands, not just your words. Here's the challenge Solitude offers. Without an audience, your choices are purer. No one's watching when you decide to return the extra change a cashier accidentally gave you. No one knows if you scroll past a friend's good news without genuinely celebrating it. These are your private marble blocks, your chance to sculpt in the dark, where the only reward is the integrity of the work itself. That's why Stoics treasured virtue above all else. Unlike wealth or fame, it can't be taken away. Unlike relationships or health, it's entirely within your control. And when you strengthen it, you carry an unshakable confidence. No matter who stays, who leaves, or who never arrives at all, you're living in alignment with something timeless. So tonight, try this. Before bed, reflect on one small choice you made today that aligned with the person you're becoming. Not the big, dramatic moments, the quiet ones. The deep breath you took instead of snapping, the dollar you dropped in a busker's case without waiting for thanks. That's not just morality, that's artistry. And your character, it's the masterpiece no amount of loneliness can undo. Imagine standing in the middle of a crowded subway station during rush hour, phones ringing, announcements blaring, a dozen conversations overlapping. Now picture Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, facing his own version of that chaos, war councils, petitioners demanding favors, the relentless weight of an empire on his shoulders. Yet in his private writings, he returns again and again to this truth. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's the heart of this lesson. External noise isn't just sound. It's anything pulling you away from your own center, endless notifications, others' opinions, even your own spiraling thoughts. Here's the paradox of our modern world. We have more tools for connection than ever, yet fewer moments of true quiet. Your phone buzzes with a news alert while you're mid-conversation. Your laptop pings with an email as you try to focus. Even your own brain churns with to-do lists and hypothetical scenarios. The Stoics didn't have social media, but they understood distraction's corrosive power. Seneca warned against being tossed like a ship without a rudder by external demands. His solution, deliberate silence, not just the absence of noise, but the presence of attention to your thoughts, your values, the moment in front of you. Try this experiment. For the next 24 hours, notice how often you reach for your phone, not out of need, but reflex. That's modern noise, the mental static keeping you from hearing yourself. Marcus Aurelius would prescribe what he called retreats into yourself, not months in a cabin, but micro moments of pause, a deep breath before answering a text. A walk without headphones, the discipline of sitting through a meal without scrolling. These aren't deprivations, they're declarations that your inner voice matters more than the world's chatter. Practical step: schedule a weekly sound bath, but not the trendy spa kind. Go somewhere you can control the input, a library corner, a park bench at dawn. Even your car with the radio off. Bring a notebook and ask, what's been shouting in my life lately? Is it the fear of missing out, others' expectations? The endless compare and despair scroll, name it, then borrow Marcus' tactic. Imagine holding each distraction at arm's length, examining it like a suspicious object. Is this noise serving me or draining me? The real test comes when you return to the fray. That coworker who thrives on drama, you can listen without absorbing their energy. The algorithm feeding you outrage, you can swipe closed, because here's the secret Stoics knew: silence isn't about escaping the world, it's about re-entering it with your compass recalibrated. So tonight, as you lie in bed, resist the urge to fill the dark with one last scroll. Instead, ask yourself, what did I hear today when I finally got quiet? The answer might surprise you. The ancient Stoics had a counterintuitive habit that might sound absurd at first. They deliberately choose discomfort. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, regularly slept on a thin mat on the floor. Musonius Rufus insisted on eating plain bread instead of lavish meals. Even Marcus Aurelius, with the entire Roman Empire at his disposal, practiced fasting and wore rough clothing. This wasn't some masochistic ritual, it was strategic training for the soul. Think of it like a fire drill for your resilience. By voluntarily stepping into discomfort, they inoculated themselves against the fear of losing comfort. And here's the unexpected twist. This same practice can dissolve the dread of loneliness too. Let's break down why this works. When you're accustomed to constant comfort, endless streaming, instant delivery, curated social feeds, any interruption feels like an emergency. Silence becomes unbearable because you've trained your brain to expect noise. Connection feels urgent because you've forgotten how to be your own company. But when you voluntarily practice discomfort, you rewrite those expectations. Sleeping on the floor once a month isn't just about saving your back from a soft mattress. It's about proving to yourself that you can handle hardship without crumbling. That knowledge seeps into solitude. If you can endure physical discomfort by choice, suddenly an empty Saturday night isn't a crisis, it's an opportunity. History offers a striking example in Diogenes, the philosopher who lived in a clay barrel. When Alexander the Great visited him, offering any gift he desired, Diogenes simply replied, "Step aside, you're blocking my sunlight." That wasn't arrogance, it was the ultimate demonstration of self-sufficiency. By stripping away every unnecessary comfort, Diogenes proved something radical. Happiness isn't found in what we add to our lives, but in what we realize we can live without. Modern science backs this up. Studies on voluntary discomfort like cold showers or digital detoxes show they increase stress tolerance and reduce anxiety. Your brain learns, if I can handle this, I can handle more than I thought. Now, let's translate this to loneliness. What if, instead of fleeing solitude, you leaned into it voluntarily? Start small. Leave your phone at home during a walk. Sit in a cafe alone without distractions. Spend an evening with just a notebook. At first, it might feel unnerving, like stepping into cold water. But with each exposure, you'll notice something shifts. You start hearing your own thoughts again. You rediscover the pleasure of uninterrupted focus. You realize you're not just tolerating solitude, you're reclaiming agency over your attention. Here's the challenge: pick one comfort to surrender this week. Maybe it's sleeping without a pillow or turning off background noise while you work. even something as simple as taking the stairs instead of the elevator. The goal isn't to punish yourself, it's to remind your nervous system that discomfort isn't danger. That empty space isn't emptiness, because here's the secret the Stoics uncovered. When you stop fearing discomfort, you stop fearing solitude. They're two sides of the same coin. Master one and you master the other. So tonight, as you climb into bed, ask yourself, what comfort have I been clinging to that might actually be holding me back? The answer might surprise you. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." Think about that for a moment. In a world that constantly shouts at us to upgrade, expand, and accumulate, the Stoics were quietly pointing us toward a radical idea: that true wealth isn't measured in possessions, but in the capacity to find joy in what's already here. Picture this: you're sitting on a park bench with nothing but a well-worn book, the late afternoon sun warming the pages, no notifications, no distractions, just the slow turn of each leaf and the quiet hum of your own thoughts. That's not deprivation, that's luxury, the kind no credit card can buy. Now contrast that with the modern chase for more, the frantic refresh of shopping carts, the itch to upgrade a phone that works perfectly fine, the way we stack experiences like trophies just to post them. The Stoics weren't against comfort or beauty, they were against letting those things define your happiness. Seneca, who could afford the finest silks and feasts, often chose simple meals and plain clothing. Not because he hated pleasure, but because he knew something we often forget. The more you depend on external things for joy, the more you hand over your peace to circumstances beyond your control. Here's the irony: when you stop expecting grand gestures to fulfill you, you start noticing the tiny miracles you'd otherwise overlook, the way steam curls off your morning coffee, the sound of rain against your window when you have nowhere to be, even the satisfaction of folding laundry neatly, a chore transformed into a meditation when you're fully present. These aren't consolation prizes, they're the building blocks of a rich inner life. The Japanese call this wabi sabi, a finding beauty in imperfection and transience. The Stoics called it wisdom, so let's get practical. Tonight, try this before bed. List 3 simple things that gave you pause today. Not the big wins or milestones, the easily missed ones. The way your sheets felt cool when you first slipped into them. The passage in a book that made you stare at the wall for a full minute, thinking. Even the quiet pride of resisting impulse buys at the grocery store. Then ask yourself Seneca's question: when did simplicity last bring me joy? You might realize something startling, that your richest moments weren't the ones you planned or paid for, but the ones you simply allowed yourself to fully inhabit. Because here's the truth solitude teaches: when you strip away the noise, what's left isn't emptiness. It's the chance to finally hear the melody that's been playing all along, the one you've been drowning out with the volume of the world. And that's a song no amount of loneliness can silence. Seneca wrote his famous essay on the shortness of life, not to depress us, but to shock us awake like cold water splashed on the face of someone sleepwalking through their days. It is not that we have a short time to live, he observed, but that we waste much of it. Think about your own life for a moment. How many hours have vanished into the black hole of mindless scrolling? How many evenings blurred together because you were too exhausted from tending to other people's priorities to tend to your own? The modern tragedy isn't that our lives are short, it's that we keep handing over our most precious resource, time, to things that leave us emptier than we started. Now imagine conducting a time audit. For 1 week, track every hour like a financial ledger. Be brutally honest. You might discover you've spent more minutes watching strangers' vacation reels than calling your own family. More hours doom-scrolling news feeds than reading books that shape your thinking. More evenings accommodating others' agendas than cultivating skills that light you up inside. This isn't about guilt, it's about clarity, because when you see the numbers laid bare, you can't unsee them. Seneca would call this reckoning your accounts, and just like a business audit, the goal isn't to shame you, but to show you where you're leaking value. Here's where it gets transformative. Try a time-blocking experiment inspired by Seneca's philosophy. Reserve 1 hour each morning before the world's demands flood in for what he called the cultivation of the soul. Maybe it's journaling, studying philosophy, or practicing a neglected hobby. Guard this hour like a lion protecting its cubs. Turn off notifications. Lock your door if you must. At first, it might feel uncomfortable, even selfish. But here's the paradox Seneca uncovered. When you stop treating your time like an infinite resource, you start treating yourself like someone worth investing in. Consider the story of Laura Vanderkam, a time management researcher who studied how high achievers structure their days. She found that busy people who feel time-rich don't magically have more hours. They simply refuse to let others colonize their calendars. They schedule what matters first, then let less important demands fill in the gaps. That's Stoic time blocking in action. It's not about packing every minute with productivity. It's about honoring your growth as non-negotiable. Now ask yourself Seneca's piercing question. How much of your life is truly yours? Not the hours spent pleasing bosses, placating acquaintances, or performing versions of yourself for social media. The moments when you're fully present, creating, reflecting, or simply existing without apology. That dinner you rushed through while texting, that's borrowed time. The morning walk where you noticed the way light filters through leaves, that's claimed time. The difference isn't just in the activity, but in the ownership. Tonight, try this. Before bed, write down one stolen moment from your day, a sliver of time you reclaimed from autopilot. Maybe it was turning off the podcast to think in silence during your commute. Or saying no to a draining social obligation to finally start that painting. However small, these are the first acts of rebellion against a culture that treats your attention as public property. Because here's the truth Solitude teaches. When you stop giving your time away, you stop fearing being alone with the person you're finally getting to know yourself. Epictetus once likened envy to holding a burning coal in your hand while waiting to throw it at someone else. You're the one who gets scorched. Think about that image the next time you catch yourself scrolling through social media, wincing at someone else's vacation photos, promotion announcement, or seemingly perfect relationship. The Stoics didn't have Instagram, but they understood the human tendency to measure our behind the scenes against everyone else's highlight reel. Here's the brutal truth. Comparison isn't just a thief of joy, it's a form of self-torture. Every time you stack your unedited reality against someone's curated facade, you're handing them a remote control to your happiness, and they don't even know they're holding it. Consider the parable of two travelers. One spends her journey fixated on the other's path, how much smoother his road appears, how his backpack seems lighter, how often he stops to rest in the shade. The more she watches him, the heavier her own pack feels, the sharper the stones under her feet. Meanwhile, the second traveler notices none of this. He's too absorbed in the rhythm of his own steps, the scent of pine in the air, the way sunlight filters through leaves. Who do you think arrives at the destination more fulfilled? The Stoics would argue it's not even close. Envy doesn't just distract you from your journey, it convinces you you're on the wrong path altogether. Now apply this to the digital age. That coworker's LinkedIn post about their new job, you don't see the sleepless nights they spent doubting themselves, the influencer's pristine kitchen. You're not seeing the chaos just outside the camera frame. Even the friend who seems to have it all together, their marriage, their kids, their side hustle, you're comparing your raw footage to their edited trailer. Epictetus would say this isn't just unfair, it's irrational. If someone handed your body to a passerby, he wrote, you'd be outraged, yet you hand over your mind to anyone who comes along. Every time you measure your life against a filtered version of someone else's, you're doing exactly that, voluntarily surrendering your peace to an illusion. Here's the challenge: grab a notebook and write down 3 people you've compared yourself to this week. Not the vague, everyone on Instagram, answer specific names. Next to each, list one thing you don't see in their curated narrative. Maybe it's the stress behind that promotion, the loneliness masked by party pics, or the creative burnout they'll never post about. Then turn the page, write down 3 things you've accomplished or endured that would look different through someone else's lens. That time you navigated a difficult conversation with grace. The hobby you've nurtured without fanfare, even the simple act of getting out of bed on a hard morning. These are the uncelebrated victories that form the bedrock of your real life. The Stoics didn't preach indifference to others' success. They preached focus on your own lane. When you stop treating life like a competition no one signed you up for, you start noticing the milestones that actually matter, the ones that can't be quantified in likes or accolades. So tonight, as you charge your phone in another room, ask yourself, what if the only person I compared myself to was the person I was yesterday? The answer might just snuff out that burning coal for good. Marcus Aurelius once advised, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. That razor-sharp clarity cuts to the heart of Stoic friendship. It's not about collecting connections like coins, but about becoming the kind of person worthy of deep trust and recognizing that same quality in others. Think of the difference between a candle and a forge. One provides fleeting light, the other tempers steel. Most of our modern relationships resemble the candle, pleasant, useful, but ultimately consumed in their own warmth. Stoic camaraderie operates at forge-level intensity. Seneca's legendary letters to his friend Lucilius weren't just philosophical musings. They were the steady hammer strikes of 2 men shaping each other's character across miles and years. Consider what made their bond extraordinary. Seneca, an elder statesman and philosopher, didn't write to Lucilius to network or pass time. He wrote to sharpen, to challenge, to hold up a mirror to his friend's blind spots. Their correspondence was a masterclass in what the Stoics called sympatheia, the interconnectedness of all people, but especially those who walk the same path toward wisdom. In one letter, Seneca bluntly tells Lucilius, "You ask me what you should avoid, the crowd, not because friendship is dangerous, but because most relationships are transactional." They ask, "What can you do for me?" Stoic friendships ask, "What can we become together?" The test of such bonds isn't in grand gestures, but in silent steadfastness. Picture this: it's 3 in the morning, your phone lights up with a call. Who could you name without hesitation? That would answer, no questions asked. Not the friend who laughs at your jokes or likes your posts, but the one who'd sit with you in an emergency room or help you bury something you regret. The Stoics measured friendship by this metric, not how often you clink glasses, but whether you'd trust them to hold your darkest hour. History offers a striking contrast in the relationship between Cicero and Atticus. While their letters reveal warmth and mutual benefit, Atticus, a wealthy banker, often tempered his counsel to suit Cicero's political ambitions. Compare that to Seneca loaning Lucilius his own books, knowing they might not be returned, or Musonius Rufus standing by his student Epictetus even when the latter's disability made him a social liability. Stoic friendship isn't convenient, it's covenantal. Here's where modern life complicates things. We've conflated connection with community. 500 followers aren't 5 friends. A full calendar isn't a rich inner circle. The ancient Stoics would urge you to conduct an audit, not of how many people know your name, but of who truly knows your character. Who's seen you fail and didn't look away? Who's called you out when you strayed from your values? These are the rare bonds that outlast life's storms. So tonight, try this exercise. Light a candle literally or metaphorically and name 3 people you'd trust with your unedited self. Not the polished version you present at parties, but the one that doubts, struggles, and sometimes stumbles. Then ask Seneca's question, have I been that friend in return? Because the paradox of Stoic friendship is this: the more you cultivate depth in others, the less you fear solitude. You carry their voices in your bones like a compass, long after the conversation ends. Imagine watching storm clouds gather on the horizon while your neighbors scramble to board up windows, but you're already sheltered, your supplies stocked, your lanterns fueled. That's the power of Seneca's practice of preparation over prediction. The Stoics didn't wait for disaster to strike before building resilience. They trained during calm weather so they'd stand firm when skies darkened. Now apply that to solitude, those moments when loneliness feels like a sudden downpour, when plans cancel, when messages go unanswered, aren't failures of your social life. They're tests of your emotional shelter. Did you build it sturdy enough during the sunny days? Seneca's letters reveal a startling truth. The most tranquil minds aren't those that avoid hardship, but those that rehearse for it. He wrote of wealthy Romans who'd periodically dine on peasant food, sleep on hard floors, even wear threadbare clothing, not as punishment, but as inoculation. By voluntarily facing discomfort, they stripped adversity of its power to shock. Modern psychology calls this stress inoculation training, and it works just as well for emotional storms. The friend who practices spending evenings alone with a book isn't just passing time. They're constructing a mental lean-to for when isolation feels overwhelming. The person who journals through minor rejections is gathering kindling to weather colder nights ahead. Here's the question most of us avoid until it's too late. How would you handle not just an evening alone, but a month? A year, not hypothetically, but in practice. History offers sobering examples. Admiral Richard Byrd spent 6 months in Antarctic isolation during a 1934 expedition, keeping his sanity through strict routines and philosophical reflection, essentially applying Stoic principles before the term was trendy. Prisoners of war like James Stockdale credited Epictetus' teachings for their survival in solitary confinement. These aren't extreme cases to frighten you. They're proof that preparation transforms suffering into endurance. So let's make this practical. Start small. Designate one evening this week as your solitude drill. No screens, no distractions, just you, a notebook, and perhaps a simple task like cooking or sketching. Notice where your mind wanders. Do you itch to check notifications? Does silence feel like a weight? That's your blueprint for where to fortify. Next, create a resilience pantry, not of canned goods, but of mental resources. A playlist that grounds you, a passage from Marcus Aurelius to reread, even a friend's voicemail saved for rough moments. These aren't escapes. They're tools to rebuild your compass when life's magnetic fields go haywire. The genius of Seneca's approach lies in its inversion of fear. Most people dread adversity because they've only ever faced it unprepared. But when you've voluntarily sat with loneliness, when you've stared into its eyes and learned its patterns, it loses the power to ambush you. Like a sailor who's trained in storms, you stop asking, "Will I survive this?" and start knowing, "I've navigated worse." That's the ultimate shelter, not a life without storms, but the unshakable certainty that you built your roof strong enough to weather them. So tonight, as you climb into bed, ask yourself not whether solitude will come, but whether you're ready to meet it, not as a victim, but as a student. The answer might just change everything. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned a life of slavery into a masterclass on inner freedom, posed a question that cuts through centuries of noise. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. That simple directive holds the key to transforming solitude from a prison into a workshop. Purpose isn't just a nice to have, it's the compass that keeps you navigating when the waters get lonely. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz, discovered this truth in the most harrowing circumstances. While prisoners around him collapsed under despair, he noticed those who clung to some shred of meaning, a child waiting beyond the barbed wire, a manuscript to rewrite, even the stubborn determination to prove humanity could endure, outlasted those who'd lost their why. His conclusion, those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. Now apply that to modern loneliness. The quiet apartment isn't empty, it's a blank canvas. The unanswered texts aren't rejections, they're invitations to turn inward and ask, what's mine to do in this world? Purpose doesn't have to be grand or glamorous. It might be as straightforward as mastering a craft that lights you up, or as quiet as being the person who listens when others are too rushed to hear. The Stoics called this your ruling faculty, the inner citadel no external circumstance can breach. Epictetus, who limped from a leg broken by his cruel master, didn't waste time lamenting his body's limits. He devoted himself to the one thing no one could take, his ability to choose his response. That became his purpose, to demonstrate that freedom lies in the mind, not the circumstances. Consider the Japanese concept of ikigai, the overlap between what you love, what you're good at, and what the world needs. Your ikigai might be raising rescue dogs, writing poems only 3 people read, or simply showing up each day as a kinder version of yourself. The scale doesn't matter, the alignment does. When Frankl observed prisoners sharing their last crust of bread or whispering stories to keep hope alive, he realized purpose often hides in small, defiant acts of humanity. Your mission during solitude might be equally subtle but no less vital. Maybe it's journaling truths future generations will need, or cultivating patience through daily meditation so you can be someone's anchor later. Here's the exercise Epictetus would assign you tonight. Light a candle literally or metaphorically and ask 3 questions. What pain have I survived that could guide others? What quiet joy do I keep returning to, even when no one applauds? If I knew I'd be alone for years, what project would still get me out of bed? Your answers aren't just hobbies, they're lifelines. The artist who paints through heartbreak isn't just avoiding loneliness, she's proving beauty persists. The runner logging miles before dawn isn't just staying fit, he's honoring the body that carries him. Purpose isn't the absence of loneliness, it's the presence of something more compelling. So when the quiet feels heavy, remember Frankl's words, life never ceases to have meaning, even in suffering. Your solitude isn't a void waiting to be filled by others, it's the very ground where your why takes root, and that changes everything. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, confine yourself to the present. 4 words that hold the power to dissolve loneliness when you truly grasp them. Picture an ancient oak standing in an open field. Its roots don't ache for yesterday's rain or fret over tomorrow's storms. They drink deeply from what's here now. That's the essence of mindful presence, not just being alone, but being fully alive in your aloneness. The difference between sitting with solitude and drowning in it often comes down to where your attention rests. Start with the breath, the Stoics' anchor to the present. When you notice your mind spiraling into stories about past rejections or future isolation, feel the air moving through your nostrils. Cool on the inhale, warm on the exhale. This isn't about emptying your mind. It's about tethering to the physical reality of this moment, the chair beneath you. The weight of your hands in your lap, even the hum of the refrigerator, these are proof you're here, not lost in those mental projections of what might be. Nature offers the perfect blueprint. Watch how a tree doesn't resist swaying in the wind. It bends without breaking because its roots hold firm. Your thoughts are like those winds, they'll come and go. Mindfulness is the root system keeping you grounded. Try this next time you're eating alone. Turn it into a meditation. Notice the crunch of each bite, the way flavors unfold on your tongue, the rhythm of your chewing. What feels like a mundane act becomes a masterclass in presence when you dial in. Here's the question to sit with. Where does your mind wander most when you're alone? To past conversations you wish had gone differently, future scenarios where you're still by yourself. Those mental time travels aren't just distractions, they're thieves stealing the only moment you ever truly have, this one. The Stoics knew this intimately. Epictetus taught that suffering arises not from events, but from our judgments about them. When you're fully present, there's no room for "I'm lonely," because there's only "I am," and that's enough. For a practical exercise, set a timer for 5 minutes and observe a single object, a candle flame, a leaf, even your own hands. Each time your thoughts drift to narratives about loneliness, gently return to the details, the play of light, the texture, the stillness. You're not just passing time, you're retraining your brain to inhabit your life rather than escape it. Because here's the secret the oak tree knows: roots grown deep in the present can weather any storm. There's a reason the phoenix myth endures, not because burning is beautiful, but because what rises from the ashes carries the wisdom of the flames. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who turned exile into enlightenment, put it bluntly: difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. Suffering, in his view, wasn't something to avoid or resent. It was the forge where character is tempered. Think of coal under pressure. It can either crumble or become a diamond. The difference isn't the heat, it's how the material responds. History brims with these alchemical transformations. Beethoven composing his 9th symphony as deafness closed in. Frida Kahlo painting masterpieces from her sight. Even Nelson Mandela, who emerged from 27 years in prison not with bitterness but with a vision for reconciliation. These aren't just stories of resilience, they're blueprints for how pain can become a compass. When Mandela was asked how he survived solitary confinement, he spoke of studying his captor's language, of finding humanity in the very place designed to break it. That's Stoic wisdom in action, not denying suffering but mining it for meaning. Now bring this into your own life, that heartbreak you didn't see coming. It taught you to trust your instincts, the career setback that felt like the end. It forced you to discover skills you'd neglected. Even the loneliness that sometimes feels heavy, it's carving out a space for self-reliance no crowded room could provide. Seneca called this the art of turning obstacles into fuel. A ship doesn't learn to navigate in calm waters. It's the storms that reveal whether you've built your vessel well. Here's the challenge hiding in plain sight. Suffering only becomes wisdom when you're willing to sit with it long enough to understand its contours. Most of us rush to numb the pain, binging, scrolling, drowning it in noise. But the Stoics practiced something radical. They leaned in. When Seneca lost his son, he didn't plaster over the grief. He wrote about it, dissecting his own sorrow like a surgeon studying anatomy. What does this loss reveal about what I valued? He asked. How can I honor it without being consumed by it? That's the pivot point, where pain stops being something that happens to you and starts being something you work with. So tonight, try this. Light a candle and ask yourself Seneca's question. What has been my greatest teacher, not in books but in wounds? Maybe it was the betrayal that taught you discernment. The failure that revealed your true priorities. Even the quiet ache of solitude that showed you how to be your own sanctuary. Write it down not as a lament, but as a letter of gratitude to your past self. Thank you for enduring this because it gave me. That blank isn't just a word, it's the bridge between suffering and strength, because here's the truth the phoenix knows: ashes aren't the end, they're the raw material for what comes next. And you're not just surviving the fire, you're learning how to rise. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who turned a life of enslavement into a masterclass on inner freedom, put it plainly: it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Think about that for a moment. Two people sit in the same traffic jam, one white-knuckling the steering wheel, muttering about wasted time, the other listening to an audiobook they've been meaning to finish, grateful for the unexpected pause. The external circumstance is identical. The experience couldn't be more different. That's the heart of this lesson. Loneliness, like a traffic jam, isn't just an event, it's an invitation to choose your interpretation. Consider the last time solitude felt heavy. Maybe it was an empty weekend stretching ahead with no plans, or a quiet apartment after a long day. In that moment, what did you tell yourself? This proves no one cares, or this is my chance to recharge. The Stoics would call that internal dialogue the real battleground. Events themselves are neutral. It's the labels we slap on them that determine whether they crush us or strengthen us. Marcus Aurelius journaled about this at the height of his power. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Now apply this to unwanted solitude. The friend who cancels plans last minute isn't just creating an empty evening. They're handing you a blank canvas. You get to decide whether it's a void or a sanctuary. The Stoics practiced this mental reframing like athletes train their bodies. Seneca, exiled to Corsica, didn't waste his days lamenting his banishment. He studied the island's flora, wrote letters that would shape Western philosophy, and observed how clear his thinking became without Rome's distractions. His circumstances didn't change his relationship to them, did? Here's how this works in practice. Next time loneliness lingers, try Epictetus' two-question drill. First, what about this situation is truly within my control? Maybe not the silence itself, but whether you fill it with self-pity or purposeful action. Second, what story am I telling myself about what this means? That narrative, I'm unlovable, this will never change, is optional. Swap it for I'm being prepared for something, or this quiet is temporary, so I'll use it well. History offers striking examples of this reframing in action. Beethoven, going deaf, didn't abandon music. He composed his most revolutionary works by feeling vibrations through the piano. Helen Keller, locked in darkness, called it my soul's sunrise. Neither chose their hardships, but both chose their responses. Your solitude is no different. That hour alone with your thoughts, it could be a prison cell or a laboratory for self-discovery. The difference isn't in the clock on the wall, it's in the mindset you bring to it. So tonight, when the quiet feels heavy, try this experiment. Grab a notebook and draw 2 columns. Label 1, event, and write down the bare facts. No plans tonight. In the other column, interpretation, brainstorm 3 alternative meanings. Maybe it's space to finally start that project, or proof I'm discerning with my time, or even a chance to practice being my own best company. The goal isn't to fake positivity, it's to prove that the story you're telling yourself isn't the only one possible. Because here's the secret the Stoics uncovered centuries ago. When you change how you see, you change what you see. And that transforms everything. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. It's a jolt to the system, isn't it? The idea that this breath, this ordinary Tuesday, this quiet evening with no plans, it might be your last. Most of us live as if we're immortal, postponing hard conversations, delaying passions, tolerating half-lived relationships because someday feels guaranteed. But the Stoics practiced memento mori, remembering death, not to morbidly fixate on endings, but to electrify beginnings. Picture two versions of yourself, one who believes time is infinite, scrolling through another mindless evening, and one who acts as if this year could be the final chapter. Which one wakes up early to watch the sunrise? Which one finally writes that letter, starts that project, or lets go of that grudge? This isn't about fear, it's about focus. Mortality strips away the trivial like a sudden storm washing clean a dirty windshield. That argument you've been rehearsing in your head, the closet full of clothes you never wear. The dream you keep saying you'll pursue when things calm down. Death's whisper cuts through the noise. This is it. This is the time you have. The Stoics didn't use this awareness to rush through life, but to slow down, to savor the taste of an apple, the sound of a friend's laughter, the quiet pride of a day well spent. Now apply this to solitude. If you knew your remaining days were few, would you still spend them aching for invitations that never come? Or would you turn your attention to what's already here, the book that could change your perspective, the park you've never walked in at dawn, the letter you could write to someone who'll never expect it? Japanese monks practice kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, to honor flaws as part of an object's history. Memento mori does the same for time. It doesn't hide life's fractures, it illuminates them, making each moment unmistakably precious. Here's the thought experiment Marcus Aurelius would assign you tonight. Light a candle symbolizing life's fragile flame and ask, if this were my last year, what would I stop pretending about? Maybe it's the relationship you've outgrown, the career you tolerate but don't love, or the truth that you've been waiting for permission to live fully. The Stoics weren't suggesting you abandon responsibilities, but that you interrogate which ones truly matter. A ship's captain doesn't fear the storm because he knows his destination. Mortality is that compass. So when loneliness lingers, let it be the reminder, not the ruler. That empty calendar slot isn't a void, it's a blank page in a book that's running out of pages. Fill it with something that will make your future self whisper, "Thank you for not wasting me," because the final Stoic lesson isn't about death at all. It's about waking up to the life that's already in your hands. So let's bring this full circle. Those 26 Stoic lessons we've explored aren't just ideas. They're tools, each one designed to help you reframe solitude from something you endure into something you wield. Think of them like a blacksmith's instruments, the hammer of negative visualization to test your resilience, the chisel of self-sufficiency to carve out your independence, the forge of voluntary discomfort to temper your strength. Alone time stops being empty space and becomes your workshop, where you're both the craftsman and the masterpiece in progress. What Stoicism offers isn't just a way to cope with being alone, it's a way to reclaim it. Every moment you once feared becomes a chance to practice freedom. The quiet apartment, that's your dojo for discipline. The unplanned evening, your canvas for creativity. Even the sting of rejection transforms into proof you're no longer outsourcing your worth. This is the ultimate alchemy, turning the leaden weight of loneliness into the gold of self-possession. Seneca put it perfectly when he wrote, "The greatest wealth is a poverty of desires, not because you stop wanting connection, but because you stop needing it to define you." Now here's your challenge. Don't let these lessons stay theories. Pick one, just one, to practice today. Maybe it's Epictetus' dichotomy of control when plans fall through. Or Marcus Aurelius' morning ritual of naming what you're grateful for before your feet hit the floor. Even something as simple as leaving your phone in another room for an hour to reclaim your attention. These aren't grand gestures, they're daily reps like lifting weights for your soul. Before you go, let's leave with Seneca's words ringing in your ears. You must build your life action by action, and be content if each one achieves its goal as far as possible. No one can keep you from living as your nature requires. That's the promise of Stoicism, not a life without loneliness, but a life where loneliness no longer holds the reins. If this resonated with you, hit subscribe. Every week, we dive deeper into Stoic wisdom that turns life's challenges into fuel. You're not just joining a channel, you're joining a community of people committed to growing stronger, wiser, and more unshakable, one lesson at a time. Now go practice your chosen tool. The workshop is open and the masterpiece, it's already underway.